We wanted to do this in our methods course. So given time to plan and a phone to video, students were to implement an evidence-based strategy for academic content at the peers instructional level by planning the strategy using explicit instruction with one or two peers, self-assessing it alone, and then with peers by the end of the learning segment, and be prepared to replicate the process in another course. It basically had these three functions to it. There was a planning phase, and this was done very explicit. I was modeling this along the way in all the phases. So planning had to describe what micro-teaching was, and then I provided in-class guided practice as students were planning. And then during the implementation phase, I can't even tell you how excited I am about this, that it worked so well, so powerful. I can see why micro-teaching has an effect size of 0.88. Small teams with presenters, students, and their videographer. They had 30 minutes to set up, videotape, and then transition to another group, most of them between 12 and 15 minutes. And then the reflection phase we're just now running into involves a running record, some metacognitive work that they do with the running record. They then select a 5 to 7 minute segment of their micro teaching to share with a peer. And then they together complete what we call a collaborative assessment log. And then at the end, that's what they submit these three things to me. So the planning, the students were excited about it as well, and told me they really appreciated me giving them time in class to prepare these things. So we had 2 days. The first day was really doing a lot of background knowledge on what is micro-teaching, what is explicit instruction, that kind of thing. Then students were given opportunities to plan right inside the course and then use explicit instruction to teach that to a couple peers. One of the things I learned about this planning phase is that when the candidates realized that they were to perform a micro-teaching lesson, their level of engagement shot through the roof when I was comparing that to submitting another kind of assignment that had similar objectives. That was so evident as to why micro-teaching is so powerful, is that it has this engagement level. One of the behavioral changes that were evident during the planning session was the number of detailed questions candidates asked about what to do and how to do it. And their questions helped me realize that modeling an explicit instruction event with an academic practice would be crucial. And so I did a modeling of question asking using explicit instruction with a peer talking about authentic Texas brisket. And that was really a fun lesson. During the implementation, also given 2 days, given two 35-minute segments of a lesson plan, a recording device, and needed materials, 100% of the students were able to implement and videotape the lesson with two peers by performing the explicit instruction steps for a specific strategy. And then the supports were the video recording. They had to schedule who goes first, second, third. We had to talk about contingencies around space and noise in the classroom. So there are 4 students. They had to have 4 different academic evidence-based practices so that they could see a lot of different practices within a group. So given the recorded micro-teaching segments, a rubric, and a collaborative assessment log, students are going to be able to evaluate their own teaching with a critical collaboration of peers by completing a running record, reflection questions, and the collaborative assessment log. I'll model that reflection because our students are quite averse to making truly critical comments of their peers. So we're going to try to model that so we get past unqualified praise statements they like to give each other. Micro-teaching is a very public, and candidates complete running record with metacognitive comments, then engage in a critical peer reflection. On the left is the minute. So that's 1 minute in a video clip. And number 2 is the second minute in a video clip. Down that middle column, they have to actually describe what's happening inside the video. And then on the right side, they have to begin to point out what's happening inside what's happening. So for example, they have to say, well, I'm using a visual schedule, and explain why you're using a visual schedule. Well, because it reduces anxiety, it helps transition, all that kind of stuff. At each stage, they start to see background schema or knowledge around what's happening inside of a teaching event. Hollins really inspired us for this. We used to ask what went well, what didn't go well, what are next steps? And that really always left us very flat. We adopted some of her questions. The first one is, did the students reach the objective? What evidence do you have? So that's what you do in that first block. On the left-hand column, you got how specifically do you know the student struggled? And then they have to really articulate that stuff. And if they didn't struggle, they have to tell me why they didn't struggle and what was the evidence of that. And then that middle column, I love the middle column because it says, what did you learn about your students? And then that second question, how will you incorporate that knowledge about your students in future lessons? And then the third column is what kind of collaboration took place in this lesson. And at the bottom, you see, okay, so what are your takeaways? I was trying to model this. So I had three things. I looked at my own video, my micro teaching. I said, there are three things I missed that I want to do better next time. They do the running record by themselves, and then they come back into the closed classroom with their team of 4, and then they fill this collaborative assessment log out, and they've got a rubric that they're looking at together. Every student completes their own running record, and then every student also completes with the group a learning log, and then they go in a circle. So all 4 students will have 4 completely distinct learning logs around their own micro-teaching experience. This is one of the outcomes. I said, you can do this either way. You can teach this at the peer level, or you guys can role play a 2nd grader or a 3rd grader, that kind of thing, however you want to do that. And they had so much anxiety around doing it in the first place that I didn't want to create too much of that situation. But in my debriefing with them at the end of class, they said, we could definitely do that at a more challenging level the 2nd and 3rd time. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to design 3 micro-teaching events across the course, one for surface learning, one for deep learning, one for transfer learning. We're going to make those more complex because it was very clear that they were mastering this and feeling a lot of confidence by the end of this very first time for them to do that. Micro-teaching, the evidence of this thing is absolutely amazing when you start reading the studies. The evidence suggests that it was designed out in Stanford about in the late 60s, and they're suggesting that even when you do it in this controlled setting, it has an important impact on people. So I'm impressed with it. We do a little bit of training around Socratic seminar and some training on how to yield the floor, how to generate questions, how to move past your own shyness. I said, I want you all to be in charge of a conversation where you talk about your own learning questions that you have without me facilitating that. So that would be kind of a culminating moment, bring the whole learning experience back for everybody. It's just a wonderful experiment to do this. So thank you all for listening. I'm very excited to share with you.